Stop it. I'm not going to stand in front of that thing the whole time so you can see me. All right. I need to do like fresh recordings of this in the next two lectures because things went wrong before. So hopefully they'll work out this time. This is not material for Thursday's exam. This is for midterm 2. So don't include any of this stuff on your midterm. All right. We are talking about the moving into a discussion of the American Revolution. And next couple lectures are on those so-called founding fathers, as you can kind of probably gather from the video that we watched. So, as that song suggested, it's probably the way we usually remember the founding fathers. It's as though they were just kind of like acted upon. So everything was like fine in the colonies, and it was like their attempt, England's attempt to take away colonists' liberties, is what actually drove the people that I call the New Englishmen to become our founding fathers. We really have to understand that the people we call our founding fathers, they had a particular vision for North America and is ultimately one that conflicted with England. So we need to understand not simply what the people we call our founding fathers were against, right? The taxes and all that kind of stuff you'll be reading about, and I'll be lecturing a little bit about down the road. We have to understand what the founding fathers were for, their vision of North America. And because you can't understand why they did what they did, or why they made the decisions after independence that they did. You can't understand it unless you understand that they had a particular vision of expansion within North America to build what I'm calling a mighty, or what they would call a mighty Republican empire here in North America. So that is our focus, to understand what the founding fathers were for. Right from high school, you get what they were against. You need to understand what they're for. And the first thing that they were for was what they called the building in North America of a, quote, mighty empire. That's their term. Let me jump ahead. I'll go back to that slide. Don't start writing things down. I'll go back to it. 1755. When does the War for Independence begin? When do we start fighting England? Very close. 1775. Yeah, the War for Independence, 1775. So 20 years before this, John Adams is writing to a friend. Look at those first couple of sentences, read those on your own. England, Adams is saying, is becoming the most powerful nation in the world. Pick up with the sentence that begins, perhaps. Perhaps this apparently trivial incident may transfer the great seat of empire into America. It looks likely to me. Were we to remove the turbulent Gallics, that's French. Let's talk about removing the Jesuits and everything. Our people, according to the exactest computations, will in another century become more numerous than England itself. Should this be the case, since we have, I may say, all the naval stores of the nation in our hands, it will be easy to obtain the mastery of the seas, and then the united force of all Europe will not be able to subdue us. The only way to keep us from setting up for ourselves is to disunite us, keep us in distinct colonies, and then some great men in each colony, desiring the monarchy of the whole, will destroy each other's influence and keep the country in chaos. What is Adams saying here? England is becoming, has become by this time the most powerful nation in the world. England is a part, or the colonies, the 13 colonies are a part of that empire. What's the future hold? And Adam's saying the future is, look, the colonies are going to become more powerful than the mother country. Think about it. England is an island. Its territory is confined. What about the colonies? Well, they're fairly confined in 1775. They're confined by the fact that there are a lot of French and Native Americans out west. Does anyone know what event is going on in 1755 that's leading Adams to think about removing the turbulent French? Or that war that happened before the War for Independence, the war that in many ways would bring on the War for Independence? Or the worst named wars, most confusing named wars in all of history. French and Indian War. Yes, the French and Indian War. So confused me growing up because I'm thinking the French and Indians are fighting each other, but they're not fighting each other. It's the French and Indians are working together to fight the British. This is the context in which Adams is writing. If somehow we can get rid of the French, we can expand. We can go west. The colonies can grow. We can have more colonies. We can expand out west. And if we do, think about all the land that we have. It's not just that we have access to the Atlantic here. What about out there? Maybe there's another coast over there. We could become more powerful than England. Now, Adams is not saying at this time, he's not saying, hey, let's break away from England. He's simply saying, he's simply crunching the numbers, saying, look, England is an island with limited land resources, a limited population resources. We are not that. We have abundant natural resources, and our people are having a lot of babies. We are really, really young here. What he imagines is, well, that phrase, the transfer of the seat of empire into America, the relationship between England and her colonies is going to have to change. Down the road, Adams can imagine that the British Empire, the seat of the British Empire is not going to be in England anymore. The seat of the British Empire is somehow going to be in North America. It's going to be like in Philly or like in New York. It's just simple power dynamics. We have more abundant natural and human resources. Not quite yet, but if we are allowed, particularly if we are allowed to expand, the word empire that they're using is a territorial term. Don't think Darth Vader, okay? Empire literally means, a country over or like a large stretch of land. If we have the freedom to build an empire or to expand the British Empire in North America, we're going to be more powerful than the island of England itself. And again, he's not saying, hey, let's break away. No one in 1755 is saying, let's break away from England. He's just saying our relationship with England is going to have to change. And he fully expected that as a consequence of the French and Indian War, that was going to change. What we have to understand is the people we call our founding fathers, they weren't just like sitting back all kind of happy and content, and then England started passing, taxes and quartering soldiers and things like that. That's not what happened. The people we call our founding fathers were interested men. They had a particular vision of North America and was a vision of imperial expansion. It was a vision of being able to expand to the West for opportunity, yes, but out of necessity because we had a growing population, right? Remember, England in the 1600s was that place that everyone had to get out of because of limited resources and overpopulation. If we can expand, people like Adams are saying, we're going to have exactly the same kind of problems here. We're going to have overcrowding. We're going to have more class conflict. We have to be able to expand out west. And as we do, right, England can't expand. England is an island. We can expand territorially. And as we do, again, it's not that England and the colonies are going to separate. No one's imagining that, but somehow that relationship is going to have to change. So we have to understand that people we call our founding fathers were people who were thinking like John Adams. There are people who were, well before a conflict with England, in the midst of this French and Indian War, never let a crisis go to waste, right? They're imagining As a consequence of this war, the French and Indians, or at least the French at least, will be removed as a threat, and England can begin expanding more into the West. And as they do, the colonies are going to become more powerful, taking advantage of all the natural resources that they are hoping lie out there. Certainly taking advantage of the land they know lay out there. And this is America's future. The future of North America is the future of expansion. So people call our founding fathers, they were not acted upon, they were acting. They had a particular vision, and that was one of imperial expansion. In 1755, they're imagining imperial expansion on behalf of the British Empire, on behalf of pride in the British Empire. No one's talking about breaking away from England at this point, but they are talking about that relationship changing. John Adams is one of those individuals. Jonathan Mayhew, a pastor, was another one. 1759, Jonathan Mayhew would write, actually, he prophesies that a mighty empire is going to be built here in North America. Methinks I see mighty cities rising on every hill, mighty fleets alternately sailing out and returning laden with the produce of this and every other country under heaven. Happy villages and fields, wherever I turn my eyes to a vastly extended territory. We're going to expand our territory. We're going to expand commercially. America's future lies in expansion. America's future lies in power. You guys are used to this. Coach talked to you about manifest destiny, right, as kind of a 19th century thing, something that happens after independence. People we call our founding fathers, they're imagining expansion before independence. In fact, it's one of the things that will lead them to eventually imagine them breaking away from is that commitment to expansion, the way that England would seem to stand maybe in the way of that. So almost all of the individuals that we venerate as the founding fathers or the leading founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, John Adams, Ben Franklin, all these individuals who were so crucial in making the decision for independence were individuals who shared this vision of America becoming a mighty empire, or British North America becoming a mighty empire, of expanding to the West. And they imagined the French and Indian War as an opportunity for that to happen. So I kind of talked about John Adams here. Let's get in and talk about Ben Franklin. Now, you remember Ben Franklin? He's the guy who invented electricity, or maybe Coach shared some of the sexcapades of Ben Franklin, particularly when he was living in France. That's not the Ben Franklin that I'm interested in. The Ben Franklin that you need to know is the Ben Franklin who was America's leading imperialist. Ben Franklin was the leading advocate for America becoming a mighty empire in the 1750s and the 1760s. Even more so than John Adams. Adams is doing this, talking about a transfer of the seat of empire. He's talking about this through letters. Ben Franklin is out there actively advocating for American expansion. And it makes sense. Franklin is somebody who's on the front lines of the empire. He's a newspaperman, right? He's following the news. He's tracking the news of what's going on in the British Empire. Newspapermen often, because they have to write on politics, they want to become involved in politics. In the 1750s, Ben Franklin decides he wants to kind of, get into politics. So Ben Franklin is there in Philly. Pennsylvania politics, I'll talk more about this down the road, is in the hands of wealthy Quaker farmers. Ben Franklin wants to kind of come alongside. He doesn't necessarily want to run for office. He doesn't necessarily want to be like a representative, but he wants to be the person who whispers in the ear of the other representatives. I really like Ben Franklin's leadership style. It's how I would want to lead too. I don't want to be the person who's like leading the cause who's going to get shot. I want to be the person on the side who's telling other people to go lead the cause and go get shot. And then that way I don't get shot. Right? So I have an influence, I have a part, but I don't get shot. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I know, I'm really cynical. That's Ben Franklin. All right. Franklin was not somebody to put his neck out, but he was somebody to whisper in the ears of everybody else, to put their neck out. And so Franklin was able to keep his head down through this whole time, while helping to direct ultimately this vision of expansion and eventually independence as well too, when it became clear that expansion couldn't come apart from independence. Franklin will be advising on PA politics when the French and Indian War breaks out in 1754. This is kind of weird. In your textbook, you're going to read about the French. Sometimes it's going to be called the French and Indian War. Sometimes it's going to be called the 7 Years' War. The French and Indian itself is confusing because it's not French and Indians fighting each other. It's French and Indians fighting the British. The other thing that's confusing is it's called the 7 Years' War, but it actually runs 1754 to 1763. Math majors in here, that's not 7 years, right? That's 9 years. The French and Indian War begins in 1754. It becomes a global, in many ways, the planet's first global war in 1756. The British against the French predominantly, but a lot of parts of the world were becoming involved in this. In many ways, it's the first World War ever fought. Certainly the most extensive. And that's the 7 Years' War. So when you're reading the textbook, understand French and Indian War, 7 Years' War, same thing. French and Indian War breaks out in 1754. Franklin realizes, again, never let a crisis go to waste. And this was a crisis in 1754. There's a couple things happening. The French, for different reasons, in part because they're being provoked by George Washington, you'll read about in the textbook, decide to start making war on the British colonies, and they're going to have Native American allies to do so as well. Well, the colonists have Native American allies on their side too, or at least they used to. In 1754, the Iroquois, who were allies, the Iroquois were really good. We've talked about this before. The Iroquois were really good about, oh, we are loyal to the French. We will help you against the British. Oh, we are loyal to the British. We will help you against the French. The Iroquois played both sides in this. The Iroquois in 1754 were like, you know what? We're sick of working with you British. You guys are so dishonest. You never keep your word. And so in 1754, the Iroquois said, our deal with the British is off. We're working exclusively with the French now. At a time in which the French are deciding to come for the colonies, it is a major existential crisis for the British colonies. If the French, now with Native Americans, are going to be able to coordinate an attack against the colonies without Native American support. The colonies uncoordinated, because there's 13 colonies, there's no central government. They're in a difficult spot. But Franklin also sees this as an opportunity. The document that I sent you kind of lays out how he sees this as an opportunity. Settling of 2 Western settlements. So you can, I would, for your next test, I would just kind of keep that, you maybe either print that document out that I sent you. I'll be sending you a couple of documents, print that out, or just have it, keep it in your email or something like that if you want to reference. But what Franklin talked about, and here's how we know that Franklin was an expansionist, is because he's writing a pamphlet here in the midst of the early part of this war saying, hey, we should be settling more Western colonies. And it's for the same reason that John Adams had talked about. Our population is growing. Our population is increasing in number. We're going to have increased poverty. We're going to have increased class conflict. We're going to have, just all kinds of hardship if we can't move out west. We haven't been able to move out west because of the French and Native Americans. Now the French and Native Americans are coming to us. This is our opportunity to go after them. And as we do, let's establish some colonies out there. But, and this kind of goes to a later point that he makes in that document. It has to do with what's called the Albany Plan of Union. The only way that the colonies were going to be able to, one, defend itself against French and Indians, two, be able to have an orderly expansion in the future is if we have some kind of government overseeing us. We can't do this on the basis of like 13 different colonies. It already wasn't working. In many ways, the French and Indian War was provoked by Virginia's expansionists. And Virginia's expansionists, particularly George Washington, brought all the other colonies into this kind of threat. And so Franklin up there in Pennsylvania is like, you know, we really need some coordination here. Maybe Pennsylvania doesn't want to go to war against the French, and here the Virginians drag us into this war for their land interests. And so we really need to have some kind of way of working together. And so Franklin is able to help Pennsylvania call for, in the midst of this beginning of this French Indian War, the end of the Iroquois alliance. Franklin is able to call for a conference at Albany, New York. What it's called, the Albany Plan of Union. Albany, New York. The Iroquois come. Our old allies come, and representatives from the 13 colonies all come to Albany, New York. Ultimately, Franklin has the blessing of the crown for this. They approve of this because the crown understands that, hey, there's something really big going on here, this French and Indian War. And so they get together. Franklin kind of, takes a lead in this. And at the Albany Conference does two things. It restores the great chain of being with the Iroquois. So we're going to restore that relationship with Native Americans. So we will have Native Americans fighting on our side. Oh, fun. Just an aside, a fun fact. Franklin would write the Canada pamphlet. I know it's kind of weird for Americans to consider this, but the people we call our founding fathers were very worried about Canada at this time. And so they were constantly thinking about how can we invade Canada before Canada invades us. And so all throughout this time, they were trying to figure out how we could invade Canada before Canada comes to get us. I know it's kind of weird, but there it is. All right, back on track, the Albany Plan of Union. The Albany Plan of Union is a plan of union of the 13 colonies. Well, in many ways, the Albany Plan of Union, the reason we don't call it this is because nobody remembers the Albany Plan of Union. Even at the time when we grew up, our later national governments, nobody really talked about the Albany Plan of Union. But the reality is, historically, this was the first attempt of the British colonists to develop some kind of national government, to develop a United States or United Colonies of North America. And they're trying to do it in response to the French and Indian crisis. Iroquois historians actually like to claim that they are the inspiration for the United States of America. And it's because the Iroquois looked at the Albany Plan of Union. The Iroquois were actually talking with Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin would publish some of these stories, and Iroquois told Ben Franklin, you guys should build your own confederacy. We did this because Dagan and Ouida told us to do. You guys should really do it too. And Franklin's putting these Iroquois stories out there as part of the propaganda on behalf of developing a kind of intercolonial government. Ultimately, the Iroquois historians are wrong. They're not the inspiration for the United States of America. But reality is the Iroquois were the first to build some kind of Confederate government in North America.
The English tried to do it in 1754 at Albany. And so it's an actual plan of union. There isn't a States General, it kind of, well, today Congress was designed as part of the plan of union. That all the colonies would send representatives to. The king would appoint kind of I forget like a president or head of the council or something like that. But it was an actual government with representation from the colonists, but also kind of still under the authority of the monarchy as well too. This was a king approved plan of uniting the colonies under some kind of common government. For Ben Franklin, it was to solve the immediate problem of needing to fight a common enemy, right? Imagine trying to fight a war today as like 50 different states. Imagine trying to fight a war without a United States Army or military. You can't do it, right? It's impossible to do. But this is what the colonists were trying to do in 1754. There's like 13 different colonies, all in their different ways, trying to fight French and Indians. And Franklin is saying it doesn't make sense. In the short run, we need a common government to meet a common threat. But as Franklin makes plain in that pamphlet, the settling the two Western colonies, Franklin's looking down the road like John Adams. He's saying, as we look to expand west, as we look to expand north into Canada, we need a government to help order that process. Right? It can't just be Massachusetts expanding and Virginia expanding and South Carolina expanding. We need some kind of central body to say, here is how we're going to settle the West. Here is how we're going to expand to the north. Here's how we're going to build an orderly, mighty empire. Something that Franklin believed, we should do because of the abundant resources that lay out west. But something that we needed to do because we were such a young population having lots of babies.
And so who is Ben Franklin? Guy who invented electricity? No, he's an advocate, and in many ways the leading advocate for America becoming a mighty empire. Taking the opportunity of the French and Indian crisis to expand to the west, to expand to the north, to create an orderly system of intercolonial government to be able to do so. I mean, if there is kind of one kind of early brainchild for the idea of a United States of North America, it would be Ben Franklin. Now, the reason we don't hold him up in that regards is because when we actually get to the Constitutional Convention of 1787, Ben Franklin's there. And Franklin's like, yeah, we tried to do this back in like 1754. No one really paid attention to it. And that's true. The Albany Plan of Union was drawn up. Everybody was really excited about it. They took it back to the colonies, and the colonies were like, I don't think so. There was just no interest whatsoever in developing any kind of centralized system of government for the colonies. Ultimately, the king itself said, yeah, I thought it was a good idea, but and so the Albany Plan of Union, as much sense as it made, it quickly is pushed aside. And so ultimately the French and Indian War is fought by militias raised by the individual colonies, uncoordinated, and big surprise that ultimately the British would send the Red Army in to help fight that war as well too. The colonists were really hoping that the French and Indian crisis would send a message to Britain that, hey, we can defend ourselves. We can raise our own military. See, we got George Washington here in Virginia. We can take care of ourselves. The message of the French and Indian War to England was, man, these colonists don't know what they're doing. We need to send the redcoats in to take care of them. Now, Ben Franklin, in calling for expansion and seeing this vision, like John Adams and others, he's not
Understand, he's not saying, hey, let's break away from England. It was unthinkable in the midst of the French and Indian War for anyone to be thinking about, hey, we need to declare independence from England. Nobody's thinking that. This is what Ben Franklin would write. Oh, let not Britain seek to oppress us, but like an affectionate parent, endeavor to secure freedom to her children. What's Ben Franklin's message during this time? It's the message of the John Adams and Washingtons and Thomas Jeffersons is, we really needed your help. Back in, say, Bacon's Rebellion, King Philip's War, we really needed your help back then. We're growing up. We got plans of our own. We're starting to think about our futures. We can defend ourselves. We can take care of ourselves. England, it's time to give us more freedom. England, they're not saying, hey, let's break away from England, but they're saying, let's England needs to recognize the colonies are growing up, and they need to give us more independence. How many of you hope to be parents one day? Yeah. How many of you, it's your dream for your child? I really hope that when my son is 35, he is living in the basement playing video games, not working, and ultimately calls up for food from us and is completely dependent upon us. How many of you, that is your vision for your child? Well, yeah, because you want to be down there playing video games with them and not working. I get it. Yeah, that's nobody's vision because it's not natural, right? The kids are dependent upon us, but at some point that needs to change, right? They need to become independent. They need to do all the things that the adults do, and they need ultimately to have the freedom to do it. Look, I love my son, but at some point he's got to go. He's got to go. He's 15. Like it's not too far down the road. He's got to go. Like I want my wife back. I didn't say life. I said I want my wife back. You guys, you don't know this. If you have a son, they take your wives away from you, and you got to wait about like 18 or 20 years. If you do it right, about 18 years. If you don't do it right, then yeah, 35 years down the road, you still won't have your wife back. They steal your wives. I'm still waiting to get my wife back from my son. Again, I love my son, but and he literally is down in the basement all the time. He's homeschooled. That's where he is. And that's where his gaming system is. So he's always that person down in the basement. But he's 15. He's 15. He's doing good in school. He's starting to learn to drive. He's doing the things that he needs to do to start moving towards independence. And so it's all right that he's still down in the basement. If he's still down in the basement at 25 and there's not some kind of, direction going on there, then we have a problem. Probably if he's 20 and that's still going on because it's not natural, right? The kids are dependent upon us, but as they grow up, they move towards independence and we need to give them that independence. Right, we need to prepare them for independence, and they need to accept the responsibilities that come with that freedom. It's not always a pleasant transition, as some of you probably know. Some of you might feel like you have the parents who want to keep you, in the basement till you're 35. I lived in the same street for my first 20. I was still living at home when I was 27 years old, but it took me a long time for medical reasons to get through undergraduate. And I think my mom's vision of graduate school is that she would, because I didn't drive at the time, she would drive me up to this university up in Scranton. Yes, Dwight Schrute Scranton. Yes, would drive me up to Scranton, and I would go to graduate school up there, and that would be like how this would work. Right? And I completely blew things up. I moved to Purdue and didn't live at home anymore. My parents were okay with me still being at home when I was 27 years old because I was working towards something. I was working towards independence. I was working towards degrees, right? And so, maybe it's going to take a little bit longer than 18. Maybe it'll take 20 or 25. Maybe you'll still be 20, 25, still be at home. The important thing is that you're working towards your independence important thing is that your parents are recognizing you're working towards your independence, and they are allowing you to do that rather than trying to undermine your efforts to become independent. This is the natural order, right? As we grow up, we become independent, we become more autonomous, and our parents are supposed to recognize that, help us move in that direction. This is what Ben Franklin mentioned. This is the way that political relationships were expressed at this time. It was a language of parent and child. What are the colonies in imperial language? They are children. What is England in this relationship? England is mom. Mom needs to recognize, Ben Franklin is saying, the kids are growing up. We're not 5 years old anymore. We're 15 years old. And yeah, we still want to be part of the British family, but we're growing up and you need to give us the freedom to grow up. That's the expectation, right? People we call our founding fathers, they don't make sense unless we understand not what they were against, but what they were for. And what they were for was a particular vision of North America. It was one that they imagined that they could carry forward while still being part of the British family. They had no interest. I mean, they believed, they derived great pride, great power from being English, right? They were convinced they were the best power, the best people in the world. Why would they imagine breaking away from England? It didn't. And so they imagined as a part of the British family, they would be able to expand to the west, expand to the north, build this mighty empire. And, you know, mom would still be mom. But mom was going to let her kids grow up. Now, from what you know from Coach, from your high school history of the Revolutionary period, is that what England did? No. Did England listen? England did not, right? England was like, no, you're going to be 35 and still be in the basement. You're going to stay in the basement until you're 40. Yeah, it's not happening. And in fact, the first crisis between England and her colonies was not over taxes, was not over the quartering of soldiers. It was over the issue of expansion west. There's a whole book on this, by the way. This entire lecture comes from a book called A Mighty Empire. It's a rethinking of the story of what brings on the American Revolution. It's not, if we just focus on the taxes and quartering of soldiers and the Boston Massacre and all that kind of stuff, we come away with only like a half a vision of what the people we call our founding fathers were actually like. These were interested men. These were individuals who imagined not just America's future, but their own futures and their own fortunes lay in Western expansion. And they really hoped, as Adams expressed in that letter, if we could get rid of the French, if we could move the French out, then then we can really expand, because there's no one else out there, right? It's only the French out there. It's not like there are more Native Americans out there, right? Yeah, the reason you're reading the Indigenous Continent book is to completely blow up the idea that there's nobody out there. In fact, what that writer is going to do is say, no, Native Americans, not only are they out there, but they are actually controlling this continent well past the years of the Civil War. Indigenous Continent is going to completely change. I did just read it myself. It's going to change the way that we think about the development of North America.
You can actually download that book for free online.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I found a free website you can download it.
Oh, cool. Well, talk to Danielle if you want a free copy, if you don't have your copy. You have to like promise to kill somebody
No, I just
first, or
Indigenous Continent full text, and there's just a bunch of websites, and you just find one and just download them.
well, there you go. If you don't want to pay the author his proper due, then you can get a free copy.
No, hey, you're college students. You need to save money.
That's that.
That's what it is. So this is the expectation. The French are gone. We're going to be able to expand to the west. It's at the end of the French and Indian War that this first crisis between England and her colonies begins to arise. And this has all to do with everything I'm going to explain now has to do with the Royal Proclamation of 1763. Okay. I need to provide some backstory. This is textbook Yop stuff, so you'll be encountering this as well too. It's looking by 1760, right? French and Indian War begins 1754. Forget exactly what year the British sailed the redcoats in, but by 1760, it's looking to everyone like, yeah, the French, they don't have the manpower. The Native Americans, they don't have the manpower. They're not going to be able to stand up against the Red Army. And so the French and Indian War is going to end the French presence out west. It's just going to be Native Americans out there. Everybody's seeing this. The English are seeing this. Ben Franklin's seeing this. John Adams is seeing this. Is sweet. Now we can expand to the west. The French are seeing this as like, all right, let's let's get back to Canada. But Native Americans are seeing this too. And Native Americans understand what had allowed us to survive, right? After we've been decimated by disease, by warfare, what's allowed us to survive for these last several decades is the fact that we could play the French and the British off against each other. By 1760, it's very clear we're not going to be able to do that anymore. We're only going to be able to deal with the British. And we know what the British want. They want our land. You begin to see Native Americans doing things that they had not done before. Native Americans are so troubled during these years. And when I'm talking about Native Americans, I'm talking about particularly tribes that are now kind of like in Ohio and Georgia and these areas. So a little bit more interior, still the eastern half of the United States, but more interior than say were big tribes like the Iroquois and the Algonquin were, more interior tribes. They're so troubled by what's going on. They rewrite their creation stories. You know, they used to say one creator created like all people out there. Now you start seeing creation stories where one creator created like a white man and a black man and a red man. And it's like there's just separate creations out there. And the message from Native Americans is we should all kind of stay in our lanes. There isn't like one humanity that should get along with each other. There's like three, and we should all be kind of separate from each other. A prophet named Neolin would arise in the Ohio River Valley saying, for too long, we have worked with the British and the French, these Europeans. We've worked with them. We've traded with them. We've given too much away to them. And look what it's done to us. We've become dependent upon metalwork goods. We've become dependent upon the alcohol. Time to sober up. Time to purify. It's seriously under Neolin's, for lack of a better term, ministry, prophecy, if you will. Native Americans in the Ohio River Valley start going kind of a revival. We need to get back to the old ways. We need to get back to independence. And part of that is cutting ourselves off from the Europeans. We can't do that if they're constantly encroaching on our land, constantly coming towards us. One of Neolin's converts, a man named Chief Pontiac, is somebody who sees kind of the political implications of Neolin's message of revival. We need to send a message to the British, right? While the French are still here, we need to send a message to the British. Stay in your lane. Stay on your side of the country. Leave us alone. And so Pontiac begins doing something. tribes have done this. Algonquins have done this. Iroquois have done this. Pontiac is building a much broader, scholars would call this a pan-Indian movement. Your Ohio, your Iroquois, your Narragansett, we all have a common enemy. Individually, we can't defeat the British. They're coming for us and we can't defeat them individually. If we pull our resources, we can send a message. And that's what Pontiac does. He goes around to these different tribes, these different villages. He builds an army. And in 1760, Pontiac begins this counterinsurgency against the Redcoats. And it's immediately successful. Pontiac is taking British fort after British fort after British fort. And the British are like, what the heck is going on? They've never seen anything like this. Certainly nothing on the scale of what Pontiac is doing. As you'll read in the textbook, ultimately Pontiac's rebellion is put down. The French and Indian War begins not just with a peace treaty with the French in 1763, but also with the pacification of Pontiac's rebellion. But the English are looking at this situation. They're saying, okay, we're done with the French. Native Americans are still there. We have a problem. Because we know what our colonists are going to keep doing. Our colonists dragged us into this war. George Washington and his buddies kept going into Indian country because they wanted to take that land. And they provoked this war. The colonists are going to provoke us to another war. We'll talk about this down the road. Yes, England won the 7 Years' War, this global war, but they went vastly into debt doing it. And they're looking at North America in particular, and they're saying, our colonists are going to drag us into another war. They're going to keep pushing west. They're going to keep provoking more Pontiacs. And we're going to have to bring the Redcoats back in again, fight another costly war. We can't do that. We can't keep fighting wars against these Native American tribes. So the French and Indian War ends with the Royal Proclamation of 1763. It's that. The king just takes a map and draws a line. Here's the British side of North America. Here's the Indian side of North America. So there's no mistaking on the part of the British colonists. Don't cross the line. That's Indian country. That's where they belong. The Royal Proclamation was really trying to send a message to the tribes of the Ohio River Valley. We are not coming for your land. We respect your rights to be left alone. And we're going to keep our people on our side of the line. The Royal Proclamation is intended to send a message predominantly to Native American tribes. Don't come and attack us again. Don't do Pontiac's Rebellion 2.0 again. We don't want to fight you anymore. We'll keep our people on our side of the line. You guys stay on your side of the line. We'll grow up together. That's the message. The Royal Proclamation. It's important to understand when we're talking about the Revolutionary period, events have more than one meaning depending upon kind of what side you are on in a particular conflict. We need to work harder to understand the British perspective on what's going on during these years. The British perspective on the 7 Years' War is the colonists dragged us into this war. It's not a war we wanted to fight. Yeah, we won it. Sort of, but we can't keep fighting wars here. And so the way we're going to do that is to send a message to Native Americans. Hey, you guys, this is your land. We'll respect that. We'll stay on our side of the line. How do you think the Royal Proclamation of 1763 was received by people like Ben Franklin and John Adams? Yeah, not too well, right? We know what they wanted. They wanted to expand west. We knew what they considered their chief obstacle, the French. We know what the French and Indian War did. It removed the French threat. So we know what John Adams and Ben Franklin and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, we would know all those guys wanted to do. They wanted to go out and they start taking all that land and claiming it for Virginia or for Massachusetts. And now the king passes the Royal Proclamation of 1763. They're not too happy. They've dealt with all kinds of other regulations upon them, right? The king did not, England, for instance, didn't allow the colonists to make their own clothes at this time. So weird, right? Why would England do that? Well, England made the clothes. Why would England want the colonists to make their own clothes? No, raw materials are sent back to England, and England themselves clothes to the colonists. This is the way this is supposed to work. The colonists put up with that. They put up with all kinds of policies. The Royal Proclamation of 1763 was different. This was the first real crisis between England and her colonies. This is the first time that you had the colonists set to say, yeah, maybe we can't grow together. And consider their perspective. Maybe England is not going to let us grow up. From the colonist perspective, hey, we helped you win this war. Our just deserts, or we should get to expand to the west now. And from their perspective, the king was arbitrarily drawing this line. Now, again, we need to understand the Royal Proclamation from both sides. It made complete sense from the English perspective. In my understanding, it made complete sense from the English perspective. England spent a lot of money fighting this war. Why would it want to get dragged into another war with Native Americans? And so this line made a lot of sense. Send a message to Native Americans, hey, you stay on your side of the line, we'll stay on our side, and we can live and grow in peace. The colonists, completely unacceptable. Their expectation for decades is that they were going to be able to move out west, particularly when the French were gone. The French are gone now. And now the king is saying, sorry, I drew a line, you guys can't go. It seemed to be a very arbitrary use of royal power. We need to understand how the Royal Proclamation of 1763 hurt the short, and this is kind of the last topic today, how the Royal Proclamation of 1763 hurt the short and the long-term interests of the people we call our founding fathers. Many of the people we call our founding fathers had vested interests in expansion, meaning that expansion wasn't just going to kind of benefit like their colony in general, is going to benefit them personally. Thomas Jefferson, I'll be talking about this, you'll be hearing this term down the road in future lectures too. Speculation. There's no stock market at this time. And so if you have like excess income around from, your tobacco, really good tobacco, what do you do with your excess income? How do you invest it? You invest it in land. You speculate in land. Particularly when you speculate, what you're trying to do is buy low in the hopes that down the road you sell high. There's a new book out called Speculation Nation, and it's all about how Americans in general during this time were all looking to get rich quick. Right? There's nothing new under the sun. You're thinking that somehow you could like buck the system of hard work and like crypto is going to make you like a millionaire for doing nothing. You didn't invent get rich quick. The people we call our founding fathers were trying to do that too. Thomas Jefferson, he had agents who went around looking to buy up land cheap
with the thought that eventually somebody would settle on that down the road and Jefferson could sell that deed to them. Hi, Jefferson could make money off of land speculation. Jefferson went spent thousands of pounds buying up land across the line. Now, again, there's no line there. He's buying up land in the Ohio territory. He's got speculators running around in what would be present day Ohio saying, all right, this land is Jefferson's, this land is Jefferson's, this land is Jefferson's. All of it, buying it up. But the thought that down the road, particularly if the French are gone, the English are going to move out there and Jefferson could sell the land to him high, make a profit off of doing this. George Washington was a huge land speculator. Washington's speculation was a little bit different. He and his militia who fought in the French and Indian War, they asked to be paid in land. This is why they had provoked the war in the first place. Virginia wanted to expand into the present day Ohio Valley. And so they're out there provoking war with the French. And so as a consequence, they hoped of a victory over the French. Washington and his men, pay us some land. Give us the land. Again, it's a form of speculation. We'll get the land cheap for nothing. We'll get it for our military service. And then down the road, we can sell them to colonists. We can sell them high. There was a guy in Virginia's government borrowed like 100,000 pounds of public money. Somehow I don't know how you could do this, but he did it. There's like, he took like 100,000 pounds of state money. Pound is a British, I don't mean pound is like a measurement of weight. Pound is like the British dollar, right? We've got 100,000 pounds of land claims. So my point is, a lot of people we call our founding fathers, particularly leaders like Washington and Jefferson, these guys are all having stakes on this land before and during the French and Indian War. And their expectation is after this war is over, they're going to be able to cash in. They're going to make money. What does the Royal Proclamation of 1763 do? Jefferson going to get his land? No, all that money is in limbo. George Washington, is he going to get land for his military service? No. What about that guy who borrowed 100,000 pounds in debt, securing land out there? What about him? Oh, he actually committed suicide.
Nobody's getting their money.
Theoretically, no one's getting their money. One of the hidden stories of the period between 1763 and 1775 is the efforts of Virginians to secure that land in the Ohio Valley. 1768, the Iroquois would make a deal with Virginia saying, yeah, you guys can have this land. The problem is it wasn't the Iroquois land to give away. It was another tribe, and the other tribes went to the British government and said, hey, the Iroquois said, like, Virginia could have this land, but it's not Virginia's land, it's not Virginia's land. And so again, it was canceled out. Before the war was fought between between Americans and the British, Virginians were actually 1774. Virginians were actually fighting Native Americans in Ohio in 1774. They're still trying to claim that land. So this is one of those kind of hidden stories of the American Revolution. Is one of the reasons we know these guys, they never gave up their land claims. They were really hoping they were going to be able to secure the Ohio Valley for the good of Virginia, well, for the good of George Washington, for the good of Thomas Jefferson, for the good of these speculators. So again, we have to understand that, because the way that we often talk about our founding fathers is that they are disinterested men, meaning that they are individuals who didn't want anything, and it was only when England threatened their freedom that they decided to act. That is not our founding fathers. These were profoundly interested men They had a vision of British expansion throughout North America that would benefit them personally. Washington would become richer. Jefferson would become richer. These individuals wanted to maximize their fortunes. This shouldn't surprise us. All right. Rich people want to get richer. But somehow we think that that's just rich people today. That wasn't George Washington himself. No. Rich people are the same in every age. Rich people want to get richer. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, they wanted to make money. They saw an opportunity to make money off of expansion to the west. And the Royal Proclamation of 1763, it hurt a lot of wealthy individuals. And it hurt a lot of individuals who went on to become leaders in the American Revolution. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. Is Jefferson doing what he's doing out of the abstract principles of the Declaration of Independence? Because England is threatening our life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? I think we can take him at his word. But in the back of his mind, is he also thinking, if we gain independence from England, I can go get that land out in Ohio. I and my family can become wealthy through speculation. Once we are free from the proclamation force. We are all driven by self-interest. That is the thing. Even the founding fathers. So in the short run, we need to understand the Royal Proclamation hurt a lot of people we call our founding fathers. It hurt their financial fortunes, it hurt their financial investments. In the long run, again, what's one thing that's driving them to think about Western expansion? Our people are really young, they're having a lot of babies. If we are stuck behind this line indefinitely, what's going to happen? What's the same thing that happened in England that drove people out of England? Right? It's going to be more people, less resources to go around for this people, inequality, starvation, dehumanization. In the abstract, the people we call our founding fathers were committed to national expansion because it would benefit them personally, yes, but because this was ultimately for the good of the colonies as a whole. To be able to secure abundant resources, to avoid the kind of class conflicts that plague Europe. The thing that will keep America exceptional is if we can expand and take advantage of North America's abundant resources of good land. And so there's both kind of a self-interest, but also a kind of recognition of this is good for all of the colonies and for all the people in the colonies to be able to expand west, to become what we'll talk about in the future lecture, to become self-made. And England is coming along at this particular moment and saying, sorry, you guys can't move out. You can't move out west. And we can understand why England did this. We can understand why England drew this line. They just fought a very costly war. And they were afraid of more Pontiac rebellions coming down the road. But we can also understand why George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were so ticked off. Their investments were put at risk because of this line. And the future of British North America was put at risk as well, too. It looked like Mom wasn't letting us grow up. It looked like Mom was trying to keep us in the basement indefinitely. Now, ultimately, what gets written up in the Declaration of Independence? It's not the Royal Proclamation of 1763. It's the taxes, it's the quartering of soldiers, it's the occupation of Boston. All these things you can read in the textbook, and we'll be talking about in future lectures as well too. But that was a flame. The spark was the Royal Proclamation of 1763. This is the first point where the colonists began to think to themselves, maybe we can't grow old together. Maybe we can't stay all in one family. And maybe there will be some kind of separation down the road. Have a good one.